Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum V'Chanun, Erech Apayim, Merav Chesed Be'emet, Noter Chesed La Alafim, Nosei Avon V'Fesha, V'Chatata V'Knakeh. God, O God, you are compassionate, gracious, endlessly patient, abounding with loving kindness and truth, showing mercy, forgiving crookedness, defiance, and wrongdoing, giving another chance. I have to say, just speaking and I hope hearing these words feels like a salve, especially this year. This passage, the 13 attributes of God, also called the 13 attributes of mercy, is taken from our Torah and is foundational to our high holiday and festival liturgy. Cradling us in abundant comfort, it sings of surety and protection. It reassures us that a powerful goodness will forgive our faltering, accept our imperfections, and embrace us in boundless love. It describes the divine, but these are human characteristics. And as we are created B'Tselem Elohim in God's image, this is not only descriptive of God, but an expression of the best that we can be, that we must be for one another. It's an extraordinary vision, and it's a big ask. We might even think it's impossible for us to fully embody. But surely when we consider each aspect on this list one by one, we can call up instances when others have been for us compassionate, gracious, endlessly patient, abundant with kindness and truth. And surely we can think of moments when we have given to others in these ways, showing mercy, forgiving crookedness, defiance, and wrongdoing, and giving people another chance. We can do any and all of these things. I believe that in this room, every one of us has. And yet, it is so easy to slip into the equally human antitheses of these traits. Certainly others have been to us callous, rude, hot-headed, insensitive, dishonest. And in our lives towards others, we have been judgmental, unforgiving, retaliatory, resentful, and unwilling to understand. That these merciful attributes are included in the liturgy of our most sacred days speaks to the timelessness of their presence and our enduring struggle to achieve them. We return to high holiday worship year after year to be reminded that this kind of behavior is possible, that we can make manifest the divine potential within us. But if you were like me, you might feel even more desperate for that hope this year. Because beyond the heated struggles concerning policies and battles over partisan issues, beyond the frightening instability of our government and the upending of historic norms, there is a general adversarial atmosphere of distrust, nastiness, and unwillingness to hear and forgive, a jump to judgment, and an intolerance of mistakes and misdeeds that is not only exploding at the highest forms of government, but infiltrating the nooks and the crannies of our everyday lives. Hostility in workplaces, bullying in our schoolyards, threats on Twitter, hostility in our homes. Honestly, I am sometimes finding that this overload has toughened the sensitivities in my soul, and it's frightening. The destabilization of our democracy's scaffolding may lead us into freefall, but the deepening fissures within our society, distancing neighbors, alienating strangers, and fracturing families is happening now. And we are in immediate need of healing. And we are the ones who can provide that healing. People in this country standing on every place on the political spectrum are suffering. We are all affected by the toxicity surrounding us. Much of the solution lies beyond our control, but some, as we will read on Yom Kippur, is as close as our own mouths, as close as our own hearts. Our high holiday liturgy confronts us with expressions of what we as individuals and as a community might be at our best. And our texts provide us with examples of how we fail to do so, how we neglect to live the aspirations set by these attributes of mercy. We see this, for example, in the Haftarah portion we will read tomorrow from the book of 1 Samuel, the story of Hannah. Hannah, as you may remember, suffered deeply. She could not conceive and was desperate for a child. Even more painful, her husband's other wife birthed many sons and daughters, and lacking compassion, she taunted Hannah, shaming her for her barrenness. Hannah fell into a depression, unable to eat or drink, unable to cease weeping. Her husband Elkanah didn't ignore her despair, but he took it as an affront. Hannah, why are you in such distress? Don't you know that I am more devoted to you than 10 sons? Finding no comfort at home, no person to offer understanding or compassion, Hannah turned to God. Emotionally isolated, she entered the temple of Shiloh, and from the depths of her despair, she swayed and wept and prayed. Her words were silent, but her body and her lips expressed the outpouring of her pain. Now, likely, few women were in the temple, and likely most pilgrims entered and made their offerings and then returned to the temple courtyard where they were feasting with families. So Hannah stood out. Eli, the high priest, saw Hannah lost in movement, and he assumed she was drunk. He accosted her, accused her, and worst of all, publicly humiliated her. Not exactly the attributes of mercy. Not exactly what you would respect from a religious leader in the house of God. Post-biblical commentators of the early centuries didn't express dismay with Eli's insensitivity. Instead, they martyred Hannah by elevating her suffering. Hannah became to them a vehicle to explore a confounding issue. Determining that Hannah struggled with barrenness for 19 years, they raised the question, why was a virtuous woman burdened with such hardship? They answer with a metaphor, explaining that gold melts at a higher temperature than silver. Therefore, the more valuable the metal, the greater its resilience. In other words, the intensity of people's suffering is evidence of their fortitude and their goodness. I don't buy it. It's dismissive of Hannah, and it fails. Judaism, like every other faith, wrestles with this question of suffering. Desperate to find meaning in affliction, a reason for it, a page in the Talmud presents a host of justifications for why people suffer. Here are some suggestions that we can find on that page. Suffering is a result of a sin, a misdeed, one that you might not know you have even committed, and so the suffering is a deterrent, guiding us to a moral betterment of ourselves. Doesn't work for me. Suffering is a mark of intimacy between person and God. It is a sign of love and closeness. That sounds absurd. Suffering teaches empathy and builds strength. Now, that may for some be an outcome of suffering, but I can't imagine any of us who would think it's a reason for suffering. There are more. I won't continue down the line. None of them really satisfy our needs. And I am glad to say, none really seem to satisfy the needs of the rabbis. Because on the other side of that daf Talmud, on that page of Talmud, there is a collection of stories describing various moments when these same rabbis have personally suffered, when they leave behind debate and theory and rationality, and they instead live in reality. All of these justifications fall away. For example, we learned that Rabbi Chia once fell ill, and his mentor, Rabbi Yochanan, went to visit him. Yochanan asked, "Are you at least finding value in your suffering?" And Chia answered, "No, I'm not. I'm not finding value in the suffering, and I'm not finding value in the reward." Yochanan didn't scold his pupil. He didn't try to correct him. He didn't try to convince him otherwise. What did he do? He reached out his hand to his friend, and he helped him to stand up. In every story on this page, the suffering rabbi is asked the same question and gives the same response. Nope, I don't find any value in the suffering, nor do I find any value in the reward. And in each instance, the visiting rabbi accepts his colleague's statement and then provides physical support or just sits with his friend in pain, the two together. The rabbis tried to make sense of suffering in order to help people get through it. They knew that the world, as wondrous as it is, also contains hardships and affliction. And what they concluded is that suffering is something unwelcome. More important, suffering does not hold intrinsic value. Connection holds value. Compassion, graciousness, withholding of judgment, forgiveness of erratic behaviors. The 13 attributes are essential because they are pathways towards connections, and connections are the antidote to suffering. Hannah's experience is a timeless one. Isolated in her sorrow, Hannah then experienced judgment and humiliation in the place she sought solace. The text doesn't tell us that any fellow pilgrims reached out to her with compassion. Imagine the scornful looks as she was shamed. Well, in our own city, a similar story briefly grabbed the headlines. You may be familiar with it. A mother and her autistic child attended a matinee of The King and I. During an intensely violent scene, the child cried out, distracting the audience and performers with gestures and sounds. His mother, alarmed and embarrassed, tried to quiet her son, but in his distress, he gripped onto the banister when she tried to lead him out of the theater. Around them, audience members glared and huffed. Some murmured, "Why would you bring a kid like that to the theater?" And one demanded, "Get rid of the kid." Immediately after the curtain fell, a cast member posted a message on Facebook that went viral. Here is just a small piece of it. He writes, "I am angry and sad. You think I will herald an audience that yelled at this mother for bringing their child to the theater. You think that I will have sympathy for my own company, whose performances were disturbed from a foreign sound coming from in front of them. No. Instead, I ask you, when did we lose compassion for others?" Today, something very real was happening in the seats, and yes, it interrupted the fantasy that was supposed to be that matinee. But ultimately, theater is created to bring people together, not just for entertainment, but to enhance our lives when we walk out of the door again. Ironically, that autistic child was connecting to that character on stage so deeply. He was expressing compassion. But no one in the audience had the patience, the forgiveness, the graciousness to say to the mother, "It's okay, we understand." Or to ask her, Can I be of any help? Or even to say to the child, it's just pretend. That man isn't really hurting. The actor Kelvin Moon Lowe did his best to reach out as soon as he was able. He said it broke his heart to see the mother and son seats empty before the performance ended. I don't know if his words ever reached them, but the merciful qualities that this actor expressed through his post reached families and individuals with disabilities, validating their struggles and shames, and making them feel at least a little more welcome into the theater. And it also reached those of us who can always use a reminder of our own humanity and how to respect the dignity of others. In the wake of insensitivity and hurt, Lowe carved pathways of connection and healing. Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum v'Chanun. Chanun, graciousness, is the same root of the name Hannah. In English, Hannah. The biblical Hannah is present with us on Rosh Hashanah, not only in her story, but also in this prayer, the 13 attributes. And this year, a modern-day Hannah, the Australian comedian Hannah Gadsby, joins her in reminding us about the merciful attributes that draw us toward one another. In her recent one-woman show, Nanette, Gadsby described how in a previous act she mentioned that she was taking antidepressants. After that act, a member of the audience approached her and said, "You shouldn't take medication because you're an artist. It's important that you feel." If Vincent van Gogh had taken medication, we would not have sunflowers. Gadsby responded by pointing out that Van Gogh, often isolated and ostracized, did in fact medicate. He often self-medicated, and he was treated by psychiatrists, and he was in and out of asylums. She informed this man that Van Gogh's epilepsy medication likely led him to experience colors with greater intensity. So she said to him, to this man, "So perhaps we have the sunflowers precisely because Van Gogh was medicated. What do you honestly think, mate? That creativity means you must suffer? That is the burden of creativity?" Then she said something else, which my husband made me edit out. It was really funny and very crude, but I suggest you go and watch her show in its entirety. I really do, because Hannah Gadsby's show, Nanette, focuses on the need to share the most merciful aspects of ourselves with one another. And she comes back to this reference of the sunflowers. At the very conclusion of this 1-hour show, Hannah asks the audience, "Do you know why we have sunflowers? It's not because Van Gogh suffered. It's because Vincent van Gogh had a brother who loved him. Through all the pain, he had a tether, a connection to the world, and that is the focus of the story we need, connection. We are all in this world together, and we are all doing our best to make our way through life, headline by headline, hurt by hurt, kindness by kindness. We all have equal investment in this world, though not equal opportunity. No one is here to serve another person's needs or enjoyment. No one is here to act as a foil or a target or a martyr or even a muse. No one is here to be invisible. We are here because we have no other choice. In order to imbue our existence on this earth with sacred value, in order to make meaning from our lives, we must follow the map that the 13 attributes offers us. We are a nation in pain. But even while we smart from the frustrations and injustices, we must strive to remain attuned to the pain of others, to remain ever aware of each person's humanity. Yes, it has gotten harder for us to find places of connection, and the obstacles are likely to increase. We have reason to complain that the politicians are not reaching across the aisle if not with agreement, then with graciousness and compassion, with honesty and patience, with kindness and forgiveness. We can complain. But for true healing, we too must be willing to embody these attributes as we reach across the aisle of the theater, across the aisle of the synagogue. We too must reach over the distances separating us one from the other. Let us enter this new year resisting the impulse within us to harden ourselves to the possibility of endless mercy and abundant goodness that we, created by God, can embody. Tomorrow morning, before reading Torah, we will stand before the open ark, and we will offer these words as a prayer to God, reminding ourselves that God is all of these things to all of us. I'm going to ask us to do something a little different tonight. I'm going to ask us to speak these words, but to pray them a little differently. Let's dwell in these words tonight with a little bit more contemplation, and let's think of them as our attributes, of the ones that we receive from others and the ones that we bring to others. I invite you to turn to page 228. And at the top of 228, you will see the blessing, the prayer, in the Hebrew and in the English. You may notice that I did take some creative license. I offered my own, sometimes English translation of the words. So this is what I would like us to do. To read together out loud the English, and as you're reading it, to pick one attribute that jumps out to you for any reason. And then, as is traditional, we will chant them in Hebrew 3 times. The first time I ask you to concentrate on that attribute and think of either a person who brought you that attribute in a strong way or a moment when you felt it in a strong way. The second time we chant, I ask you to think of how you have shared that attribute with someone else, a person to whom it came easy for you to share it with. And then the third one's the kicker. That's when I want you to take that attribute and think about someone for whom it is very difficult for you to offer. And when you chant it for the third time, let that blessing be for that person and a directive to each of us to carve out paths of healing and connection. Together, let's read. Adonai, Adonai, God, compassionate, gracious, endlessly patient, loving, and true, showing mercy to the thousandth generation, forgiving evil, defiance, and wrongdoing, and granting pardon. Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum V'Chanun, Erech Apayim, V'Rav Chesed V'Emet, Notzer Chesed La'alafim, Nosei Avon V'Fesha, V'Chata V'Nakei. Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum V'Chanun, Erech Apayim, V'Rav Chesed V'Emet, Notzer Chesed La'alafim, Nosei Avon V'Fesha, V'Chata V'Nakei. Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum V'Chanun, Erech Apayim, V'Rav Chesed V'Emet, Notzer chesed la'alavim, nosei avon v'fesha v'chata v'nakei. May we live these attributes, may we receive them, and may we all know healing and peace. Amen.